Chapter 1454. And Xiaoma was originally wandering around the entrance of the cave in boredom. After hearing the commotion, he thought that something had happened in the cave and was about to rush in to protect him. Before he could move, he heard some strange but ambiguous sounds. Only then did he come to a sudden realization and immediately stopped. And Xiaoma, who was still a little puzzled at first, was now extremely embarrassed. He had to pretend that nothing had happened and swayed left and right twice. Then, he controlled the flying sword to fly further away and really went on patrol. The cave was full of spring scenery. The originally somewhat cold air seemed to have warmed up a lot because of the friction. Although there was only one person moving at this time, it formed an extremely beautiful picture. It was not until half an hour later that the shaking picture finally stopped. Hongzhu was seen lying softly on Xiao Chen's body, panting slightly and sweating all over. There was a tired but satisfied smile on his face. Hongzhu could clearly feel that Xiao Chen's originally soaring body temperature was gradually falling and slowly returning to normal. Most importantly, after that exercise was over, a strong yuan qi suddenly emerged in Xiao Chen's body. Phew! Xiao Chen suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of turbid gas. His whole body seemed to have been struck by lightning. He trembled a few times before his brain recovered. Feeling as if something warm was pressing against his body, Xiao Chen opened his eyes slightly. The first thing he saw was a blurry silhouette leaning against his body. He was immediately startled, but when he took a closer look, he discovered that the person was actually Hongzhu. Husband Xiao Chen. You're finally awake. Seeing that Xiao Chen had opened his eyes, Hongzhu could not help but be overjoyed. She reached out to touch his cheek and raised her 5 fingers in front of his eyes. What's wrong? Where are we? What are you doing? Xiao Chen blinked his eyes in confusion. When he lowered his head to take a look, he realized that the two of them were currently stuck together naked. Furthermore, they were in contact with each other at a negative distance. He was shocked once again and could not even speak fluently. Hongzhu, on the other hand, did not notice that much. Instead, he happily wrapped his arms around Xiao Chen's neck and buried his face in his chest. Unable to contain his joy, he said, "Looks like that old immortal didn't lie after all. I didn't really believe him at first. I didn't expect it to really work. These days, I was worried about you. It's great that you're fine now." Woo-woo. Hongzhu, who was originally full of joy, could not help but cry. His heart was filled with all kinds of different emotions such as happiness and bitterness. When he recalled their miserable encounters over the past few days, his extreme worry for Xiao Chen's injuries, as well as his feelings of despair and unwillingness, Hongzhu could not help but have mixed feelings in his heart. It was a very unpleasant feeling. Fortunately, Xiao Chen had finally recovered. Otherwise, he really did not know what to do. Wait, where did this old immortal come from? What are you talking about? Also, how did that? Xiao Chen felt his chest become a little moist. He knew that Hongzhu was really crying, so he did not dare to move. After waiting for a while and seeing that Hongzhu had finally calmed down, he opened his mouth to ask. Blankly rubbing his head, Xiao Chen did his best to recall what had happened. Because he had been seriously injured during the clash with Elder Nangong, he had lost consciousness. Therefore, his memory had remained at that moment and had not changed. Xiao Chen had been unconscious ever since he had been rescued by Hongzhu. He had no idea what had happened during that period of time. All he felt was that he had been dreaming for a very, very long time, but he could not remember the content of the dream. Little idiot, let me tell you the whole story. Hongzhu raised his head and looked at the confused expression on Xiao Chen's face. He could not help but smile through his tears. Using a finger to poke Xiao Chen's head, he said, "It's like this. Previously, you were seriously injured by that old man Nangong. When I called out to you, you did not respond. After that, those disciples under his command wanted to kill all of us. Fortunately, this big sister is exceptionally intelligent and managed to command the flying sword in time to bring us away from the Burning Sky faction. Afterwards, we randomly bumped into this place. Hongzhu did not get up, nor did she put on her clothes. Just like that, she tightly hugged Xiaochen like a koala, and used a gentle and charming voice to narrate the thrilling events of the past few days in full detail. Ah. An old immortal whose entire body is glowing with white light? He can even extend my life? Why does it sound so unreal? I'm getting more and more confused. Xiaochen rubbed his nose, stunned by the contents of Hongzhu's description. Little scoundrel, why don't you say that it's mainly because I helped you heal? If I hadn't directed my flying sword to steal your natural treasures and patiently decoct medicine for you to take, you wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Hongzhu pouted and grumbled somewhat unhappily and shyly. When the originally battle-hardened Xiaochen heard these words, his face blushed for some reason. He looked at Hongzhu awkwardly and sincerely said with gratitude, "This time, I really have to thank you. If it wasn't for you, I probably would have already, I even caused you to lose your virginity in this kind of situation. I'm really sorry, I'm really sorry." "You're crazy, what nonsense are you talking about?" Hongzhu rolled his eyes and scratched Xiaochen's nose. In a bad mood, he lectured, "We've already been husband and wife for a long time. Is there a need to thank each other? Besides, Big Sister has always been yours, and our relationship has only taken a step further. Is there still a need to say such distant and polite words?" Yes. Xiaochen smiled embarrassedly as he thought to himself, "It was clearly you who asked for credit just now, but now you're criticizing me instead. Women are really strange creatures." However, this thought only flashed past Xiaochen's mind. He was currently filled with gratitude towards Hongzhu, so even if Hongzhu cursed or teased him a few more times, Xiaochen would not have any complaints. "Boy, don't just thank your little lover. If not for your master kindly reminding her, I'm afraid you would have really died this time." Xiaochen was pondering how to persuade Hongzhu to come down from his body when a voice suddenly resounded in his spiritual sense. "Ah. What the hell? Elder Heaven Ancestor, so the old immortal white light that Hongzhu mentioned was you?" Hearing Elder Heaven Ancestor's words, Xiaochen was instantly dumbfounded. He had originally thought that Hongzhu's luck was off the charts, and he had really coincidentally encountered a passing immortal who had lent him a helping hand. He did not expect that it was actually Elder Heaven Ancestor who had manifested himself. Of course it was me. Otherwise, who would be so bored as to run into this deep mountain forest to save an insignificant little fellow? Elder Heaven Ancestor snorted in dissatisfaction. Chapter 1455. Air. I thought there were many great magical powers in the world of cultivators, and Hongzhu just happened to see it. Xiaochen was a little embarrassed. He quickly changed the topic and asked, "But aren't you just a primordial spirit? How did Hongzhu see you? What's so difficult about that?" Elder Heaven Ancestor explained proudly, "With my strength, I can naturally affect Hongzhu's brain waves and make her hallucinate." "Oh. I see." Xiaochen answered, not really understanding. He guessed that Elder Heaven Ancestor might have used the method of possessing him to let Hongzhu see an illusion again. However, on second thought, Xiaochen suddenly remembered something. He asked in a slightly dangerous tone, "By the way, Elder Heaven Ancestor, Hongzhu chose to offer her body to help me heal. Could it be your idea?" "Ahem, I didn't say that. Don't accuse me wrongly." Elder Heaven Ancestor hurriedly denied and said awkwardly, "I only told her that she needed a method of balancing yin and yang to help you resist the drug, but I definitely didn't ask her to make such a big sacrifice." "Are you serious? Did you hint to her?" Xiaochen obviously didn't believe Elder Heaven Ancestor's words. Alas. To be honest, I also felt a little guilty at that time, because I really didn't think of a suitable method to balance yin and yang. Elder Heaven Ancestor sighed and said sincerely, "But you were in a critical state at that time, and could die at any time. If I didn't come out, we would all be finished. So, although I didn't think of a perfect way to deal with it, I was forced to use this method and told her all the methods I could think of. So, when she saw that I was in so much pain and couldn't do anything, she chose to use her body to save me." Xiao Chen's mood was a little low, and he felt that he had wronged Hongzhu. The little girl did this because she really liked you. Elder Tian's tone also carried a trace of sorrow as he added, previously, when you were about to lose your life, this girl cried so hard that she wanted to die. She even wanted to commit suicide by taking poison. Fortunately, I acted in time and saved her, so that the two of you wouldn't die in this wilderness. In truth, there was one more thing that Elder Tian did not say. If Hongzhu had not taken the poison, causing his consciousness to slacken and his soul to gradually dissipate, he would not have been able to take advantage of the situation and construct such a complete illusion. He would not have been able to successfully inject the information of the prescription and the method to obtain it into Hongzhu's sea of consciousness. After all, when he was fighting with Elder Nangong, Elder Heaven Ancestor had also suffered serious injuries, but because his soul recovered relatively quickly, his strength still hadn't recovered to its peak. Therefore, after Elder Tian helped Hongzhu detoxify his poison, replenished Xiao Chen's qi, and then constructed an illusion to explain the situation to Hongzhu, his primordial spirit also couldn't hold on any longer. He didn't even have the time to think of a suitable method to harmonize yin and yang before he fled in a sorry state. Otherwise, that illusion might really collapse on the spot, and all of his previous efforts would have been in vain. Fortunately, although Elder Heaven Ancestor didn't explain it in detail, Hongzhu was extremely intelligent, and without a teacher, he thought of the most suitable method, and finally saved Xiao Chen. Of course, Elder Heaven Ancestor didn't think it necessary to tell Xiao Chen about this. In any case, now that he had successfully awakened, everything was fine. What? Hongzhu wants to commit suicide for love. Xiao Chen was shocked, staring at Hongzhu who was lying on top of him with infinite tenderness, and couldn't help but have a good impression of her. When he was unconscious, this little girl must have been in so much pain and sorrow that she would choose such an intense and resolute action. Thinking of his lukewarm attitude towards her in the past, Xiao Chen couldn't help feeling a little guilty, and gently stroked her hair. Yes, but that's no longer important. I've already erased that painful memory of hers, or rather, I've hidden it, so she will only think that it was a dream, and won't take it seriously. Elder Heaven Ancestor indifferently said, but in the future, don't mention this matter in front of her, or else it'll be very easy to see through it. Alright, I'll remember that. Xiao Chen took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. He changed the topic and asked, then are my injuries considered to be completely healed now? Don't tell me I need to rest for a few more days. Look at what you're saying, rest for a few more days, is there a need for that? You don't believe in the medicine that I prescribed for you? Elder Sky lectured him in exasperation. That's not what I meant. Xiao Chen wanted to explain a few more words, but was interrupted by Elder Heaven Ancestor. After the yin and yang harmonization just now, coupled with the effect of the medicine, you've now reached the half-step mountain opening stage, which means that you're about to break through to the next stage of profound ascension stage, so hurry back to the Burning Sky sect, and find that Nangong something for revenge. Are you serious? Half-step mountain opening stage. Xiao Chen was dumbfounded once again. He subconsciously circulated his mental cultivation method to activate his vital qi. Only then did he realize that the many broken meridians in his body had all been repaired at some point in time. His vital qi had become denser and more solid, and the aura he emitted was also more oppressive than before. Husband Xiao Chen, you seem to have become stronger again. Feeling the oppressive aura emitted by Xiao Chen, Hongzhu blurted out in surprise, and unconsciously began to circulate his cultivation method. How did I also break through? As he circulated his cultivation method, Hongzhu suddenly discovered that he had also leveled up, and couldn't help but mutter in bewilderment, what's going on? I think I'm about to break through to the nascent soul stage. Just now we are equivalent to a higher level of dual cultivation. So not only have my injuries healed, my strength has also increased, and yours has also soared. Xiao Chen smiled slightly, and gave a simple explanation. Wow, so you can actually cultivate while exercising? That's amazing. Hongzhu blinked his eyes, his tone full of surprise and excitement, and his eyeballs rolled around, not knowing what he was thinking. That's right. Xiao Chen nodded, lightly pinched the tip of Hong Zhu's nose, and asked in a gentle voice, "It's already been a few days, right? Why don't we first return to the Burning Sky faction, kill that arrogant elder Nangong, and then I'll slowly help you level up?" "No way." Contrary to Xiao Chen's expectations, Hong Zhu actually refused, and instead said coquettishly, "There's still a while before the sun rises. Let's hurry up, we can do it again. Big sister wants to break through to the nascent soul stage right now. If you don't agree, I won't leave you." Chapter 1456. I'm going to cling on to you and not leave. After saying this, Hong Zhu was afraid that Xiao Chen would not agree, so she wrapped her arms around his neck and tightly hugged him without letting go. She pouted and stared at Xiao Chen, as if saying, "I'm not going, what can you do to me?" Seeing Hong Zhu like this, Xiao Chen felt both amused and helpless. However, he also understood very well in his heart that it was precisely because he had been avoiding Hong Zhu all this time that Hong Zhu would be so anxious. Even though he had given his body to Xiao Chen, he still felt afraid and uncertain. Thinking up to here, Xiao Chen's heart was filled with tenderness. He turned over and pressed Hong Zhu under his body, lightly kissing her delicate red lips, blocking Hong Zhu's cry of surprise. Then, he said with a smile, "Now that you're my savior, of course I'll do whatever you say. I'll listen to everything you say. Hateful little scoundrel." Hong Zhu coquettishly glanced at Xiao Chen, reached out to hold his shoulders, and took the initiative to greet him. The cave was once again filled with a strong feeling of spring. The morning sun shone on the plaza of the Burning Sky sect. What should have been a clean and tidy plaza was now a mess of many things. There were bags piled here and there, and many disciples were sweating profusely as they bent over and counted something. Duan Suqing, the sect master of the Burning Sky sect, stood at the side of the plaza with a solemn expression. Gong Xiaoxi, who also had a dark expression, was next to him. The two of them silently looked at the bags of heavenly treasures on the ground as the disciples inspected and recorded them one by one. According to the instructions given by Gong Ruidong, while dealing with the Profound Cloud sect, they had also secretly sent out many disciples to search for the whereabouts of Xiao Chen and Hong Zhu. As a result, they had searched all the nearby mountains, but still hadn't found any traces of the two. Because the majority of the disciples had been sent by Duan Suqing to search for Xiao Chen and Hong Zhu, their progress had been greatly delayed. The deadline given by Elder Nan Gong was approaching, but there was still a pile of heavenly treasures that hadn't been counted. In desperation, Duan Suqing could only spread the treasures on the square, and then called over all the disciples who were still in the sect, and let them check them one by one. "Sect Master Duan, isn't the efficiency of your Burning Heaven sect's disciples a little too low?" An impatient voice rang out from afar before the person arrived. Duan Suqing turned his head when he heard the voice, only to see Elder Nangong walking over with his subordinates from a short distance away. With a black face, he berated loudly, "It's just a piece of trash, yet you still haven't finished counting them for 5 whole days. Sect Master Duan, don't tell me you're trying to stall for time and wait for that Xiao Chang to come back and save you?" Due to the assistance of various medicinal pills, Elder Nangong's injuries had already completely healed, so he didn't want to stay in the Burning Heaven sect any longer. It was only because of the reason he had used before, which was to wait for these heavenly treasures to finish counting, that Elder Nangong had patiently waited for so many days. Elder Nangong, please don't misunderstand. I'm sure you've also seen that the number of these heavenly treasures is indeed very large. Furthermore, our Burning Heaven sect is already short on manpower, so it's really impossible for us to finish counting them in such a short period of time. Why don't I trouble you to wait for a few more days? Duan Suqing endured his anger and said with a smile. Actually, what Elder Nangong said wasn't wrong. Duan Suqing indeed wanted to stall for time. Perhaps after a few more days, the disciples would be able to find Xiao Chang. Duan Suqing originally didn't have high expectations for Xiao Chang's survival, but Gong Ruitong had always insisted that Upper Immortal Zhao's divine quality was extraordinary, and that he definitely wouldn't die just like that. Furthermore, Gong Xiaoxi also strongly supported his father's viewpoint, which was why Duan Suqing had spent so much effort to find the whereabouts of Xiao Chang and Hongzhu. Humph. Stop talking nonsense. You secretly sent out a large number of disciples just to find Xiao Chang, which is why you wasted so much time. Don't think that this old man really doesn't know. Elder Nangong laughed coldly and mercilessly exposed him. Misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding. Duan Suqing's sweat was about to drip down. He wanted to explain a few more words, but was interrupted by Elder Nangong with a wave of his hand. All right, there's no need to count them. Duan Suqing was slightly stunned. He thought that Elder Nangong couldn't wait any longer, so he planned to give up these things and directly leave the Burning Heaven sect. He couldn't help but secretly rejoice in his heart. However, before he could rejoice for long, he heard Elder Nangong continue to say, in any case, most of these heavenly treasures belong to the Profound Clouds sect. Also, hand over all the spirit crystals that you've hidden. This old man doesn't have the time to wait for you to dawdle. Give us all these things, we'll directly bring them back to the Profound Clouds sect and count them ourselves. Gong Xiaoxi had already endured by the side for a long time. When he heard Elder Nangong being so overbearing, he couldn't help but fly into a rage. He couldn't help but point at Elder Nangong's nose and scolded, "You old thing, you're simply going too far. These things were clearly seized from the mountain bandits' lair by our people. Moreover, that place is very far from your Profound Clouds sect. How could the mountain bandits possibly run to your place to snatch it?" Elder Nangong's eyes flashed. He was just worrying about not being able to find a suitable opportunity to establish his might, and now someone had taken the initiative to come knocking on his door. He pretended to inadvertently tilt his head slightly and secretly gave a look to the disciple beside him. Gong Xiaoxi didn't notice and continued to loudly scold, "You're simply taking advantage of the Profound Cloud sect's power to forcefully embezzle our Burning Heaven sect's heavenly treasures. Shameless. Smelly shameless. Impudent. Little ant, you actually dare to be disrespectful to Elder Nangong, you're F*** looking for death." A Profound Cloud sect disciple received Elder Nangong's signal and immediately stared at Gong Xiaoxi and scolded. As soon as he finished speaking, the disciple's body shook and revealed the strength of a nascent soul stage cultivator. A faint yuan qi immediately appeared and wrapped around his arm. He jumped straight into the air and then took out a huge sword that was flashing with a green light. Without saying a word, he waved his arms and fiercely chopped down at Gong Xiaoxi. Gong Xiaoxi had never expected that while he was still talking, his opponent would suddenly attack. Moreover, it was a killing move. He had no time to react at all. Moreover, he was not strong enough. Even if he wanted to resist, he would only die in the end. Gong Xiaoxi, who was completely disheartened, clenched his teeth and solemnly closed his eyes, quietly waiting for death to come. Duan Suqing, who had wanted Gong Xiaoxi to shut up, was shocked to see this. Just as he was about to quickly open his mouth to plead for mercy, he suddenly felt a green light flash in front of him and heard a crisp, "Kacha" sound of bones breaking. Chapter 1457. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, and a trail of blood spilled on the ground. Duan Suqing watched helplessly as a round thing fell to the ground, and then rolled to his feet. "Humph, you overestimate yourself. This is the result of going against our Profound Clouds sect. Sect leader Duan, ask your men to prepare a carriage as soon as possible and pack it with heavenly treasures and spirit crystals. This old man is going to..." Elder Nangong arrogantly clasped his hands behind his back. Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly felt that something was not quite right. Retracting his arrogant chin, Elder Nangong lowered his head to take a closer look. The round object on the ground seemed a little familiar. It seemed to be the head of one of his subordinates. I'm still alive? Gong Xiaoxi closed his eyes and waited for a long time but did not receive the sword qi. He could not help but open his eyes in astonishment. However, what he saw was no longer the scene from before. The ferocious fellow who had swung the huge sword at him had disappeared. In his place was the back of a youth who stood steadily in front of him. The youth's left hand was gripping the blade of the huge green sword while his right hand was hugging an enchanting woman. From the close distance between them, the two of them seemed to be very close. Gong Xiaoxi was stunned for a long time before he carefully walked forward. When he saw the faces of the two of them, he was so shocked that he almost jumped up and shouted, "Immortal Master! Master's wife! Why is it the two of you? Why aren't you dead yet? Ba ba ba. That's not right, you're still alive. Xiao Chang. You're actually alright?" When Elder Nan Gong heard Gong Xiaoxi's voice, he raised his head in astonishment. His expression immediately changed and he could not help but blurt out. The two people standing not far away were Xiao Chang and his cultivation partner. Furthermore, the two of them looked very energetic, especially Xiao Chang. His face was rosy and he did not look like someone who had just been seriously injured. Hongzhu ignored Elder Nangong and snappily glared at Gong Xiaoxi as he lectured, "You're no longer a child, yet you're still speaking so recklessly. Pay attention in the future, don't embarrass your master. Master's wife, you really know how to talk. So I wasn't hallucinating." Gong Xiaoxi's shock turned to ecstasy and he shouted excitedly, "That's great. Master's wife, where have you been hiding these past few days? My father and junior brothers were worried to death. Fortunately, he firmly believed that you would be fine. Now that you've returned safe and sound, he will be happy to death. Exalted Immortal Xiao, it's great that you're back." Duan Suqing's blabbermouth gave Gong Xiaoxi a headache. He quickly took 2 steps forward and explained, "After the Grand Elder learned that you were injured, he was very worried. That night, he sent most of our disciples out to search for you. Unfortunately, they didn't find anything, so he was so worried that he couldn't eat or drink for several days. If he knew that you two had returned safely, he would be very happy." Originally, when Elder Nangong questioned him, Duan Suqing had wanted to hide it. Now that Xiao Chen had appeared, he decided to spill the beans. This angered Elder Nangong so much that his face darkened. "Oh, I went out for a trip and gave this Elder Nan some time to recover before killing him. Otherwise, it would look like I'm bullying him." Xiao Chen nodded and gave Hongzhu a peck on the cheek, causing her to tremble with joy. Everyone present was stunned by her coquettish and bashful look. Although he said so, Xiao Chen thought to himself, "If it weren't for Elder Heaven Ancestor and Hongzhu, let alone recovering, I might have died in that wilderness." Congratulations on your return from your trip, Immortal Xiao Chang." Duan Suqing complimented him with a smile. Suddenly, he patted his head and said to himself, "Oh, right. Look at my brain, I have to tell this good news to the Grand Elder as soon as possible." Duan Suqing, who came to his senses, quickly called over a disciple and instructed him to quickly report the situation to Gong Ruidong. Xiao Chen smiled faintly. He turned to look at Elder Nan, whose face was as black as coal, and said coldly, "Old bastard Nan Gong, it seems you didn't expect that I would come back to beat you, did you? I didn't expect you to have such a tough life." Elder Nan Gong frowned and said in a gloomy tone, "Last time, you fled in panic because of a woman. This old man was merciful and couldn't kill you with my own hands. Sure enough, I left behind a lot of trouble in the future." Looking up at the flying sword hovering in the air, Elder Nan Gong found that the sword was stained with a lot of blood. It was obvious that his disciple had been beheaded by this thing just now. Xiao Chen curled his lips and thought to himself, "Old bastard, you really know how to talk big. At that time, you couldn't even protect yourself. If it weren't for that strange magic tool protecting you, who knows who would have fallen to the ground. Now you're really talking big." Glancing at the headless corpse on the ground, Elder Nan Gong's tone became even more unfriendly. "Today, I was careless and you took advantage of it. I lost a beloved disciple for no reason. Since you're back, don't even think about escaping this time." "Oh, why do I feel that I should be the one saying this?" Xiao Chen yawned absent-mindedly, and said very casually, "However, this exalted deity's mood right now is still not bad. If you are willing to immediately kneel and beg for mercy, then honestly tell me who ordered you to cause trouble at the Burning Sky sect, this exalted deity might even be merciful and spare your dog life. After he finished speaking, Xiaochen kicked the corpse of the Xianyun sect disciple away with the tip of his foot. Then, he crossed his arms in front of his chest and slowly took a few steps forward. A faint light flashed in his deep eyes as he raised his eyebrows at Elder Nangong. Seeing Xiaochen like this, Elder Nangong couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He vaguely felt that this kid seemed to have changed into a different person. He had an indescribable aura. Thinking back to the last time he saw him, he didn't seem to have this kind of feeling. However, this thought only flashed in Elder Nangong's mind, and he didn't take it to heart. Seeing Xiaochen's provocative posture, he looked up to the sky and laughed. With a face full of certainty, he asked, "Xiaocheng, you must have thought that my injuries haven't healed after the last battle, so you're thinking of taking advantage of my weakness to take my life, right?" Xiaochen blinked his eyes, and before he could answer, he saw Elder Nangong's body suddenly tremble. He immediately revealed the cultivation of the peak profound ascension stage and laughed at him proudly. "How is it? You didn't expect me to have recovered, right? Are you surprised? Are you afraid? Ha ha ha." Chapter 1458. In fact, Elder Nangong was also a little puzzled. In his opinion, he had borrowed the power of the Xianyun sect. In addition to the protective magic artifacts, he also had many elixirs on him. It was normal for him to recover from his injuries by taking them in time and recuperating. Xiaocheng seemed to have recovered too. What was the excuse of going on a trip? Elder Nangong immediately concluded that this guy was definitely lying. This guy probably had a lot of top-notch elixirs on him and was just pretending. Looking at Elder Nangong as if he was a fool, Xiaochen couldn't be bothered to talk to him. He instructed the two primordial spirits in his sea of consciousness, Little Nethery, and Little Demon, "I'll leave the fools behind to you." After giving the order, Xiaochen immediately used his movement technique and attacked Elder Nangong. He waved his right arm and punched his lower abdomen. Taking advantage of the momentum of Xiaochen's charge, the fire of the underworld also came out of his body. It instantly split into two and attacked the two subordinates behind Elder Nangong from the left and right respectively. And Little Demon controlled the flying sword that was still stained with blood and flew down from the sky with a whoosh. The sword was surrounded by black mist and went straight for another Xianyun sect disciple. "You guys be careful. If you can't beat him, just stall for time. Don't force yourself." Elder Nangong regarded Xiaochen's two magic tools with great importance. His eyes were fixed on Xiaochen, but he gave a few instructions to the disciples behind him. Then, he charged towards Xiaochen. Although Elder Nangong's magic artifact had been shattered by Xiaochen previously, he felt that even if he was unarmed, he would be able to kill Xiaochen who did not have a magic artifact. In the blink of an eye, Elder Nangong's feet stomped on the ground and he pushed his palm out to meet Xiaochen's fist. Boom! When the fist and the palm collided, a loud sound rang out. A powerful shockwave instantly appeared and quickly spread out in all directions. When the two collided, Elder Nangong was slightly puzzled. "It has only been a few days since we last met. Why does this brat's strength seem to have increased by quite a bit?" However, before the Nangong elder could figure it out, he felt a surge of surging essence suddenly follow Xiaochen's fist and ruthlessly charge out, striking his palm. Bang! A muffled thunder-like sound rang out. Elder Nangong's entire body was involuntarily sent flying by the shockwave. He smashed through a few trees at the side of the plaza before he lost his momentum and fell heavily to the ground. Elder Nangong's face was full of disbelief. He raised his head and glared at Xiaochen. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly felt as if his internal organs were in turmoil. He only had time to spit out a few mouthfuls of blood before his vision went black and he fainted. The three disciples of the Xianyun sect did not see the battle between Xiaochen and Elder Nangong because they were focused on avoiding the joint attack of 9 underworld flames and Xiaomao. Because these disciples often practiced joint attacks, they could barely resist for a while against 9 underworld flames and Xiaomao. They followed Elder Nangong's teachings. Since they couldn't hold on, they would try their best to stall for time until someone reached out to help. However, after resisting for a while, the three disciples did not wait for Elder Nangong's help. Seeing that the situation was getting more and more difficult, the three of them took advantage of one of the gaps and looked in the direction of the battle between Elder Nangong and Xiaochen. They were surprised to see Xiaochen looking at them leisurely with his arms crossed in front of his chest and shaking his legs. The three of them were a little flustered. When they turned around, they saw Elder Nangong lying motionless behind a few broken tree trunks. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. There was also a large pool of blood on the ground. They were immediately shocked. There was a flaw in their joint attack. How could 9 underworld flames and Xiao Mao let go of such a great opportunity? The two of them immediately took advantage of the situation and hit the three disciples who were at a loss. One of them was directly pierced in the chest by Xiao Mao, and the other two were instantly burned to ashes by 9 underworld flames. Senior brother Wu Er, I heard that master came back safe and sound. Where is he now? The battle here had just come to an end. Gong Ruidong's urgent call suddenly came from a distance. It turned out that Gong Ruidong had just gotten the news from his disciple. He was so excited that he jumped up and immediately dragged his legs that had just recovered. He couldn't wait to rush to the scene as fast as he could. He looked around the square in a hurry, but he did not see Xiaochen. Father, junior brother, master is fighting. Gong Xiaoxi pointed to a place not far away and said excitedly in a low voice, before you came, master had already crippled Elder Nangong. Oh, I mean sent him flying. His subordinates have also been eliminated by him. He is now preparing to interrogate them. You'd better not disturb him now. Let's talk about it later. Gong Ruidong quickly turned his head and saw Xiaochen walking towards Elder Nangong with a smile. He was still holding a water ball in his hand. Okay, I will wait here. I am willing to wait as long as it takes. Gong Ruidong's face was full of joy. He nodded and promised. Xiaochen didn't notice what Gong Xiaoxi was doing. Instead, he walked straight to Elder Nangong and waved his hand slightly. The water ball spell that was originally floating in the air poured onto Elder Nangong's head with a splash. Puff. Cough, cough, cough. Elder Nangong was still in a coma. He was directly awakened by the water. He lay on the ground and coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. Xiaochen was too lazy to care about Elder Nangong's pretense. He kicked him hard and said with a sullen face, I just abolished your cultivation. Don't pretend to be dead in front of me. If you don't want to feel that feeling again, tell me quickly. Who sent you here? The skin on Elder Nangong's face became a little loose and old. He stared at Xiaochen in a daze, his eyes filled with disbelief. He trembled as he asked, You're already an opening mountain expert? Xiaochen smiled coldly and answered with a tacit agreement. Although his cultivation was only half a step away from the opening mountain stage, since this old thing was willing to believe so, there was no need for him to rush to deny it. He would let him be surprised for a while. How is this possible? Elder Nangong was so shocked that he could not close his mouth. He said with a face full of disbelief, previously, you were seriously injured by me and basically lost your vitality. In just a few days, not only did you successfully recover, but you also successfully broke through? Chapter 1459. Alright, don't talk about those useless things. Xiaochen waved his hand and continued to ask, Isn't your Yunxian sect quite powerful? Aren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself by finding such a poor excuse to stand up for those mountain bandits? I'm in a good mood today. I'll give you 2 choices. Either tell me the person who instructed you, or... Xiaochen didn't finish his words, but made a, expression, then he snapped his fingers. The underworld fire and Xiaoma, who were originally wandering around those disciples, heard the signal and immediately approached. The former emitted a strange blue-purple flame, swaying in front of Elder Nangong, ready to burn him to ashes at any time. The latter didn't say a word and directly put the flying sword on Elder Nangong's neck. When the flying sword was put on the neck, Xiaoma, who was hidden in the flying sword, deliberately shook slightly, making a clear cut on Elder Nangong's throat, making him groan in pain. Elder Nangong struggled in his heart for a while. When he sensed Xiao Chen's rising killing intent, he knew that there was no way he could resolve this matter peacefully. All he could do was hang his head and explain in a low voice, "This old man, actually, I have never seen that person's true appearance. This is because we normally communicate through voice transmission talismans. I only know that his subordinates address him as the young master of a large faction. Your Yunxian sect, which is ranked second in the immortal cultivation world, is actually a dog for other forces." Xiao Chen sneered and said sarcastically, "I really didn't expect you to have such a hobby." "No, this matter has nothing to do with Yunxian sect. I brought my own disciple to help him." Elder Nangong quickly denied it this time, and then explained, "Because the young master's father saved me back then, so I want to return the favor this time." "So, young master's father? Then he is the old master of that force? What is his name? What does that force do?" Xiao Chen frowned. He was not used to Elder Nangong's tongue-twisting words. Elder Nangong's eyes flickered slightly. He muttered to himself for a moment before changing into a helpless expression. He smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, I only met the old head once. After he saved me, we exchanged contact details. However, we never met again, so we don't have a particularly deep friendship." "Is that so? So you came to provoke him this time because you knew in your dream that his son was in trouble, so you took the initiative to help, right?" Xiao Chen's expression did not change, and he casually found a reason for Elder Nangong. No, we usually keep in contact through the sound transmission talisman." Hearing Xiao Chen's merciless mockery, Elder Nangong's sweat dripped down, and he added while trembling with fear, Even when I was ordered to stand up for that young master, I only went to his residence once, and simply chatted with his subordinates for a bit. After understanding the situation, I immediately brought people to Burning Heaven's sect." "Oh, if that's the case, then take us to his residence tomorrow." Xiao Chen brushed his sleeves, and said indifferently, "I want to see what this strange young master really is." Elder Nangong's strange expression just now had already fallen into Xiao Chen's eyes. He knew that this guy was definitely not telling the truth, but he did not plan to pursue it too much. Right now, he only had this one clue, so he could not force him too much. Before finding out the young master's true colors, Xiao Chen decided to temporarily let Elder Nangong live. Anyway, this guy was now a cripple, and could not cause any big waves. "Guards! Detain this good-for-nothing." Seeing that Xiao Chen had already finished interrogating him, Gong Ruidong and the others, who were standing not far away, immediately courteously welcomed him, and conveniently ordered the other disciples to take Elder Nangong away and imprison him. Arriving in front of Xiao Chen, Gong Ruidong first respectfully bowed, then revealed a happy smile, and said, "Greetings, Lord Master. You don't know this, but ever since you disappeared, I, your disciple, have been unable to eat or sleep in peace for several days. Today, seeing that you and Master's wife are both fine, my heart can finally be at ease." Although Gong Ruidong had always firmly believed that Xiao Chen and the others were not dead, and had asked Duan Suqing to send people to the nearby mountains to search for traces of them, he still felt uneasy after not finding the whereabouts of Xiao Chen and Hong Zhu for a day. Now that he saw the two of them alive and well, and that Xiao Chen's strength seemed to be even stronger than before, Gong Ruidong's heart finally fell to the ground. "Father, senior brother, I already told you, didn't I? Our senior immortal master looks like he will live for 100 years, how could he be so easily killed by bad guys? You are making a fuss about nothing." Gong Xiaoxi casually patted Gong Ruidong's shoulder and said. Gong Xiaoxi's proud look seemed to have completely forgotten that when he was panicking before, it was Gong Ruidong who stabilized the morale of the troops and pointed out the right path for him to calm down and arrange the follow-up work. Yes, son, you are right. It is all my fault for being too nervous." Gong Ruidong was in a good mood, and did not intend to refute anything. Instead, he happily nodded his head and echoed. "I say, the two of you are really..." Xiao Chen frowned as he looked at the two of them, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he still shook his head and said, "Forget it, this weird relationship always gives me a headache." Let's not talk about such nonsense and quickly prepare some hot food. I am about to die from hunger. Xiao Chen subconsciously rubbed his stomach. He had been unconscious during this period of time, and besides drinking a bowl of medicinal soup, he had not eaten a single grain of rice. When he had just woken up, he had been forced by Hongzhu to hand in his homework several times. Even though he had broken through to the half-step mountain opening realm, he had still almost collapsed from exhaustion. That's right, this master's wife is also so hungry that her chest is sticking to my back. Let's quickly go eat. Hongzhu also walked over at this moment, stretching her body as she said this charmingly. Originally, Hongzhu was a young girl who was both charming and pure, and now that she had tasted the forbidden fruit for the first time, her entire body exuded a kind of fatal attraction. Every movement of hers had a charm that made one unable to move their eyes away. Gong Xiaoxi was subconsciously attracted by Hongzhu and stared at her in a daze for a long time. Only when Gong Ruidong gave him a heavy kick did he return to his senses. It was not that Gong Xiaoxi had any improper thoughts towards his master's wife, but because of the mental cultivation method that Hongzhu cultivated, he could not help but be attracted to her. Gong Xiaoxi swallowed hard, then bowed with a smile and said, "Great immortal master, master's wife, sect master Duan has already thought of this, so he has already ordered the disciples to start preparing. I believe that it should be about time now. Please come with me, I guarantee that you will all have your fill." Chapter 1460. After the matter was settled, the few of them swept away the haze in their hearts for the past few days. They chatted and laughed as they walked towards the kitchen, leaving a string of cheerful laughter in the Burning Sky faction. That night, Xiao Chen still stayed in the Burning Sky faction, patiently consolidating his cultivation that had just reached the half-step mountain opening stage. He originally wanted to continue working hard and break through to the first level of the mountain opening stage, but after repeated attempts, he still couldn't find the way, and could only helplessly choose to give up. In fact, the most important thing was not that Xiao Chen didn't know how to cultivate, but that Hongzhu was constantly harassing him, teasing him from time to time. Now that the two of them had broken through that layer of window paper, and their relationship had also taken a step further, Hongzhu also became even more unscrupulous. His words and actions made Xiao Chen's mind swayed, and his heart rippled incessantly. Since he couldn't make a breakthrough in a short time, Xiao Chen simply stopped cultivating. He hugged Hongzhu and rolled on the bed a few times, before the two of them hugged each other and fell asleep. Early the next morning, Xiao Chen and Hongzhu packed their luggage, and after a simple farewell to the group of people in the Burning Sky faction, they stepped onto their flying swords outside the sect. Under the gazes of Gong Xiaoxi, Duan Suqing, and the others, they carried Elder Nangong and left on their flying swords, flying towards the location of the mysterious young master. The few of them flew according to the direction pointed by Elder Nangong for about an hour, traversing over towering mountains and lofty ridges along the way, passing through large stretches of primordial forests, and occasionally hearing Elder Nangong's fearful cries along the way. Finally, before the sun rose, they arrived at the outskirts of a prosperous town. "Hey! Old man, don't make a ruckus. Don't you realize that your legs can already step on the ground?" Hongzhu angrily kicked Elder Nangong, gritted his teeth and said hatefully, "I couldn't tell that a dignified sect elder like you, who was once an expert at the peak of the profound ascension stage, would actually be afraid of taking a plane. You're too useless." Along the way, Hongzhu's ears were almost deafened. Good heavens, an unprepossessing old man could continuously howl for an entire hour, and his voice wasn't hoarse at all. Could it be that he had practiced before? A bel canto singer? Miss Hongzhu, please don't joke with this old man." Elder Nangong's face was deathly pale, and his legs were trembling like a sieve. After persevering for a while, he finally couldn't stand it any longer. His legs went soft, and he fell to the ground on his butt. Thinking back to the experience in the sky, he still felt a lingering fear. "When was I joking with you?" Hongzhu angrily glared at him and said with a huff, "What elder of the second largest sect? I think he's just an old man who's afraid of heights and gets airsick." "How annoying." Elder Nangong's face was bitter. He trembled and said with a sobbing tone, Although I used to be in the mysterious ascension stage, I'm just an ordinary person now. If immortal Shao accidentally let me fall from the sky, wouldn't I be smashed into pieces? That would be an ugly death. Why are you talking so much? Shao Chen impatiently grabbed Elder Nangong's collar and pointed to a nearby town. Where is that young master hiding? And what is this place? You better tell me the truth right now. Otherwise, this immortal doesn't mind letting you fly again. But this time, I can't guarantee that I won't be in the mood to catch you. Don't. I'll tell you right now. Elder Nangong's face changed. He hurriedly pointed to the town and said, Young master lives in one of the houses in Yaoxian County. This old man will bring you there right now. It was precisely because of these few confrontations that Elder Nangong was very clear that Shao Chang was definitely a person who would do what he said. Therefore, he didn't dare to delay or be negligent. He hurriedly forced himself to stand up straight and limped towards the town. Actually, after being detained in the prison yesterday, Elder Nangong originally wanted to use a sound-transmitting talisman to inform the young master in advance. However, he didn't expect that the Burning Sky sect disciple who detained him would actually search his body and confiscate all his valuables, including the entire bag of sound-transmitting talismans. Feeling helpless, Elder Nangong could only give up on this plan. Right now, he could only take one step at a time and hope that the young master could come up with a suitable and foolproof plan. Shao Chen and Hong Zhu looked at each other before holding hands and carefully following behind Elder Nangong. They maintained a distance that wasn't too far away from him. This way, they wouldn't appear to be deliberate and would ensure that they would be able to capture this fellow in an instant. In order to prevent this old thing from playing any more tricks, Shao Chen's mind was tense and he was ready to act at any time. Even if he discovered that something was wrong, he was confident that he would be able to escape with Hong Zhu. However, what surprised Shao Chen was that Elder Nangong's mood was extremely calm on the way into the city. He didn't make any strange movements and only walked in front of them obediently, as if he had truly accepted his fate. However, the calmer and quieter this fellow was, the stronger the strange feeling in Shao Chen's heart became. After entering Yaoxian province, Shao Chen pondered for a moment before quietly assigning Hong Zhu a task. He told her to find an inn to stay in and that he would pick her up after he finished his business on his side. Although Hong Zhu was somewhat unwilling, she also knew that her strength wasn't enough to help Shao Chen and would instead be a burden to him. Thus, she didn't say anything and quickly found an inn that looked more proper to stay in. She then watched as Shao Chen followed Elder Nangong further and further away, gradually disappearing without a trace. The moment Shao Chen's group stepped through the gates of Yaoxian province, the young master was resting in his own courtyard. The young master crossed his legs and frowned slightly. His expression was somewhat solemn. Ever since he had contacted Elder Nangong, he had been trying to find other information about Shao Chen. However, regardless of whether it was the information from Elder Shen or the information he found through other channels, there was nothing about Shao Chen at all. The young master could not help but feel defeated by this situation. More importantly, he suddenly realized that Elder Nangong hadn't contacted him for several days. This was something that had never happened before. Deeply worried, the young master directly tried to contact Elder Nangong through a voice transmission glyph. However, there was no reply either. This time, the young master's mood sank even further. According to his judgment of Shao Chen and Elder Nangong, it was very likely that the unkillable Shao Chang had returned to cause trouble for Elder Nangong and had successfully counterattacked. Chapter 1461. With that thought, the young master suddenly stood up and paced back and forth in the study room. With Shao Chen's vengeful personality, could it be that Elder Nangong had already been killed? Just as the young master's thoughts were running wild, someone suddenly knocked on the door and walked in without permission. The young master turned around and saw that it was Elder Shen who was in a hurry. He did not wait for the young master to speak and immediately cupped his hands. With an uneasy expression, he reported, "Young master, according to our spies in the prefecture, Elder Nangong is on his way here. There is also a young man following him not too far away." According to our informant, the relationship between these two people is not ordinary. He really came? The young master stopped and muttered hatefully, "This old fart is really unreliable. He just has to emphasize how powerful he is." I knew that Xiao Chen would not be so easy to deal with. "Young master, then what should we do now?" Seeing the young master's expression change continuously, Elder Shen could not hold it in and asked. After a moment of silence, the young master raised his head and ordered, "Immediately inform everyone in our residence to destroy all relevant evidence. Do not leave any traces, then retreat from the secret passage." "Understood, I will do it now." Although Elder Shen did not know the young master's reason for doing this, he still nodded decisively and accepted the order. Just as he took a few steps towards the door, Elder Shen suddenly thought of something and turned around to ask, "Young master, that little girl with the surname Cheng is currently in the prison cell in the garden of the residence. How do you think we should deal with her? Should I just kill her or bring her here?" His fingers rhythmically tapped on the table a few times. As if he had made a decision, the young master solemnly ordered, "You don't have to worry about that little girl. I will personally arrange her whereabouts. Now, you should go and deal with other matters first. Once everyone in the residence has safely evacuated, find me at the entrance of the secret passage. Then, we will make the next plan." Although he did not know what the young master wanted to do with that little girl, Elder Shen did not dare to ask too much. He immediately responded and left to start arranging the evacuation of everyone in the residence. The house that was originally peaceful suddenly began to boil. Everyone began to move. Some were busy destroying things, some were hurriedly packing up, and some were running around like headless flies. For a moment, the whole yard was in chaos, and people were in a complete mess. Meanwhile, the young master stood at the door of the study and calmly glanced at it. Then, he silently left the study and walked towards a secluded path. In the gloomy cell, Qing Menjing lowered her head and sat there gloomily. Her body was tightly bound by a rope that was filled with strange symbols and looked like a dumpling. When Qing Menjing had just been tied up by Elder Shen, she had tried to break free, but every time she tried to use her essence energy to break the ropes, the symbols on the ropes would emit a faint golden light, directly dispersing the essence energy that she had gathered in her body, and then it would return to silence. After trying a few times, Qing Menjing finally understood that the rope that was tied up on her body was not ordinary. It could use the strange symbols on it to suppress the essence energy of the person being tied up. Furthermore, with her fiery eyes, she had never failed before. Needless to say, Qing Menjing could guess that this was definitely the young master's bad idea. However, there was nothing she could do about this rope. She could only helplessly give up on the idea of escaping. Fortunately, other than being tied up and unable to move, there was a specialized servant girl to take care of everything else, so there was no inconvenience. Creak. The sound of rusty metal scraping against each other could be heard. The metal door of the cell was opened by someone. Qing Menjing, who was in a daze, looked up when she heard the sound. When she realized that the person who came was the young master, she couldn't help but glare at him hatefully. Then, she angrily turned her head away and put on an indifferent expression. "Miss Cheng, you're living comfortably here. Every day, there are servants to serve you. Your days must be pretty good, right?" The young master stood in front of Qing Menjing and smiled sinisterly. "Whether it's comfortable or not, won't you know after a few days? Why are you asking me?" Qing Menjing snorted coldly and retorted mercilessly. The young master's expression turned ugly after being rebutted by Qing Menjing. He simply bent over and picked up the rope that was tied around Qing Menjing's body. He pulled her up and was about to drag her out of the door. He didn't forget to say viciously, "I thought that you were probably tired of this place, so I specially found a new place for you out of goodwill. Come with me." "I don't want to." "You. Where are you taking me?" Qing Menjing was shocked. She couldn't help but be dragged out by the young master. She stumbled a few steps before she remembered to struggle with all her might. "Let's go to a place first. I'll let you see some good things. Then, I'll bring you to a new cell to settle you down. Don't worry, the new place won't be worse than this fake mountain." The young master turned around and bared his teeth at Qing Menjing. He looked extremely terrifying. I'm not going. You. Let go of me. Qing Menjing struggled with all her might, but it was to no avail. She was still dragged out step by step by the young master. Qing Menjing was anxious and angry. She originally thought that when she was imprisoned, Xiaoqun would coincidentally find this place and rescue her. She didn't expect that after waiting for a few days, there would still be no trace of him. She couldn't help but curse the young master in her heart. All right, this matter isn't up to you. You'd better follow me obediently. The young master increased his strength and dragged Qing Menjing out of the cell without any explanation. They passed through the corridor and out of the fake mountain. Qing Menjing originally thought that the young master would take her outside the house. She didn't expect that they would just circle around the fake mountain and arrive at the side of another secret door. The young master looked around vigilantly. After confirming that there was no one around, he pushed open the secret door and entered the dimly lit secret passage. Then, he closed the secret door casually. From the outside, not a single trace could be seen. The two of them walked deeper into the secret passage. Qing Menjing looked left and right at the secret passage. She realized that the surroundings were rather rough, but there were many signs of use. Moreover, the entire secret passage was very deep. Even after walking for a long time, they still couldn't reach the end. The young master silently led Qing Menjing forward until she felt that they had long left the house. When she didn't know where she was, the young master stopped at a fork in the road. Chapter 1462. Qing Menjing looked around and found that this fork was connected to several doors in different directions. Some of them seemed to be secret rooms, while others seemed to be exits or entrances. From time to time, someone would come in from one of the openings, holding bits and pieces of things in their hands. Then, they would hurriedly head in another direction and disappear at the end of the secret passage in the blink of an eye. There seemed to be several magic arrays set up in the entire secret passage. For example, as long as someone entered or left the door would light up with a silver-white light. It looked like a small magic array, but it was unknown what it was used for. When the people dressed in servants' clothes passed by the young master and Qing Menjing, they seemed to completely ignore the young mistress who was tied up. Instead, they bowed respectfully to the young master, then turned around and left in a hurry. The young master stood at the fork for a while, seemingly observing the situation of the people coming and going. Then, he walked towards a door and pushed it open with Qing Menjing. They walked into a secret room. After Qing Menjing walked into the secret room, she still looked back at the slowly closing door. She mainly stared at the light on the door, wanting to see what the magic array looked like. However, because the light was too bright, she couldn't see it clearly. It seems that you are quite interested in this magic array? The young master noticed Qing Menjing's abnormality, but he didn't stop her. Instead, he said with a proud look. What's there to be interested in? Qing Menjing was caught red-handed. She snorted uncomfortably and said, Isn't it just a magic array for illumination? It's flashy but useless. That's where you're wrong. The young master raised his eyebrows and pointed at the magic array on the secret door. This magic array isn't used for illumination. It's used to detect the situation and prevent enemies from invading. Qing Menjing looked at the faintly glowing magic array in astonishment. She couldn't figure out how such a small magic array could prevent enemies from invading. Since you are also a high-level immortal cultivator, you must have released your divine senses to investigate the surroundings, right? The young master seemed to have become addicted to being an explanation. He explained in a clear and logical manner, once a cultivator's divine sense comes into contact with this kind of formation, it will automatically activate and set up all kinds of targeted illusions to deceive the opponent, making them see the wrong illusion. Even if your servant, Xiaoqun, came here, he would still be trapped by this formation. You make it sound like it's real. Qing Menjing pursed her lips. She didn't really believe the young master's introduction. Xiaoqun won't be deceived by such a low-level smokescreen. You're just wasting your time. Although she said that, Qing Menjing didn't have much confidence in her heart. Firstly, she didn't know if Xiao Chen would be able to rush over to save her. Secondly, after this period of immersion in the immortal cultivation world, she also knew that there were many strange things in the immortal cultivation world. She didn't know if Xiao Chen could easily see through this kind of magic array. Ha ha ha, Miss Cheng, you're too naive, aren't you? The young master looked up to the sky and laughed a few times. He walked to a corner of the room that had a magic array drawn on it. He stretched out his hand and pulled on the rope, dragging Qing Menjing in. He said with a proud expression, "Let the truth tell you the truth." After saying that, the young master started to circulate his mental cultivation and revealed his golden core stage level 5 cultivation. Then, he started to silently chant a strange incantation. When Qing Menjing felt the young master's strength, she was a little annoyed. If she wasn't tied up by this strange rope, dealing with this guy would be a piece of cake. The young master didn't know what Qing Menjing was thinking. He continued to chant the incantation step by step. The magic array on the ground immediately emitted a soft white light. The white light was projected onto the wall in front of the two of them, reflecting the image of the front door of a house. Qing Menjing focused her eyes and realized that the house was no different from the house that she had been caught in. However, there was a huge sign hanging on the door. Moreover, there was no content on the sign. It was blank and looked very strange. Why does it look like a surveillance camera? Qing Menjing muttered silently. Although she was usually careless and didn't understand the abilities of cultivators very well, she still remembered that Xiao Chen had mentioned that some magic arrays seemed to have the effect of surveillance. That's right. This is a surveillance array. Just watch patiently. There will be a good show to watch later. The young master nodded his head proudly and directly admitted it. Qing Menjing was a little puzzled. Looking at the young master's confident look, could it be that Xiao Chen had really come? Sure enough, not long after, the image on the wall reflected the figures of Xiao Chen and Elder Nangong. When Qing Menjing saw the familiar figure that she hadn't seen for a long time, her eyes instantly turned red. There was an indescribable emotion in her heart. In the past, the two of them often spent time together, so Qing Menjing didn't feel anything. After a period of separation, she realized that she actually had a strong dependence on Xiao Chen. Especially after entering the world of cultivation, so many people were missing. Even if she wanted to find them, she couldn't. She often woke up in fear at night, worried that something bad had happened to the others. At this moment, seeing that Xiao Chen appeared safe and sound, Qing Menjing couldn't be more happy. Did he know that she was locked up here by the bad guys, so he specially came to save her? The surveillance image on the wall was still playing. She saw Xiao Chen and Elder Nangong enter the house one after another. Elder Nangong seemed to be familiar with the layout of the house. He turned around and said something to Xiao Chen, then led the way to the room where the young master was. From the image, Xiao Chen seemed to be more cautious. He followed behind Elder Nangong carefully and looked around from time to time, as if he was looking for something. Although his steps were very slow, he gradually left the range of the surveillance image. Did you see that? My servant has come to save me. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and let me go. Qing Menjing took a deep breath to calm her emotions, then shouted at the young master. The young master acted as if he didn't hear Qing Menjing's words. He directly walked to another array and chanted an incantation. Then, another image appeared on the wall. It seemed to be the path to the main room of the house. Xiao Chen and Elder Nangong were walking in step by step. Apart from them, there was no one else on the image. The whole house looked very cold and deserted. Did you hear what I said? Qing Menjing put on a fierce look and threatened the young master. If you serve me well, I might consider pleading on your behalf. Otherwise, I'll let my servant, Xiao Chen, send you flying. He's not like me, he has such a good temper. Chapter 1463. Oh, I'm so scared. The young master stared at the image without turning his head. He did not forget to mock, wait until your Xiao Chen can find our secret passage first. Even if he can enter the secret passage, those illusion arrays are enough to make him lose his mind. In the image, Elder Nangong and Xiao Chen had already walked to the outside of a large room. Elder Nangong went up and knocked on the door respectfully. Xiao Chen directly struck out with his palm and smashed the door to pieces. Then, he rushed in. Seeing Xiao Chen recklessly destroying his own courtyard, the young master's face was a little ugly. He quickly walked to another array and projected the scene inside the room onto the wall. He saw Xiao Chen walking back and forth, carefully inspecting the empty room. Elder Nangong stood at the side with a pale face. He also looked around in confusion, as if wondering why this place had suddenly become empty. Xiao Chen. I'm in the secret passage, behind the fake mountain in the back garden. Hurry up and save me. Cheng Menjing took advantage of the young master's inattention to take a deep breath and shouted at the wall with her loudest voice. The entire secret room was shaken by Cheng Menjing's voice. The echo lingered in the air for a long time. Oh, damn, I didn't know you were so young, but you have such a loud voice. The young master rubbed his ears and rolled his eyes at Cheng Menjing. He said casually, but this trick is useless. Don't waste your energy. The entire secret passage has a layer that isolates divine sense and sound. Even if you shout yourself hoarse, he won't be able to hear you. Just as the young master said, although Cheng Menjing's voice was loud, Xiao Chen on the screen did not notice it at all. He continued to search the room. Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen. I'm here. I'm in the back garden. Hurry up and come over. Cheng Menjing was a little unwilling to give up. She wanted to try a few more times, so she shouted at the wall. All right, stop shouting. I don't mind telling you that the secret room we are in is no longer behind the fake mountain in the garden. Also, the courtyard that Xiao Chen went to is not the same courtyard that you were locked in. So it's useless for you to shout. Give up. The young master waved his hand impatiently. When Cheng Menjing heard what the young master said, she immediately felt a little discouraged. She glared at Xiao Chen, who was still looking left and right in the room, and muttered, "Stupid Xiao Chen, you're so stupid. You can't even find me like this. You might as well just blow up the entire floor. Maybe it'll have some effect." It was unknown if Cheng Menjing's words were effective or if Xiao Chen suddenly found some clues, but he suddenly turned around and quickly walked out of the room. Soon, he disappeared from the surveillance screen. Creak. The moment Xiao Chen's figure disappeared, the secret door of the young master's secret room suddenly opened. The sound of the iron door turning could be heard. The young master, who had his back to the iron door, jumped in fright. He thought that Xiao Chen had really been called over by Cheng Menjing. He couldn't help but shiver. He suddenly turned around and put on a defensive posture. Cheng Menjing also thought that Xiao Chen had come. She turned around happily, but she saw Elder Shen walking in with some documents. The excited expression on her face immediately collapsed. Young master, everyone has been evacuated. All the useless documents have been destroyed. There are no clues left. What should we do next? Elder Shen looked at the two people with different expressions. He didn't understand what was going on, but he didn't dare to ask in detail. Instead, he reported in a serious manner. Cough cough. When the young master saw that the person who came was Elder Shen, he withdrew his defensive posture awkwardly. He cleared his throat and pretended to be nonchalant as he instructed, "Oh, what did you say just now? Everyone has been evacuated, right? Then let's go. Since Xiao Chen likes this place so much, let him slowly play by himself." After saying that, the young master pulled the rope in his hand and dragged Cheng Menjing out of the door. The immortal binding rope in his hand was a magic tool that could suppress a cultivator's essence chi. Although it couldn't hurt people directly, it could disperse all the essence chi that the person who was tied up had mobilized. Therefore, even though Cheng Menjing had the cultivation of the original soul stage, she was no different from an ordinary person after being tied up. The young master didn't have to worry about her suddenly launching a sneak attack or escaping. Qing Menjing was dragged out by the young master and couldn't help but walk out. She tried her best to turn around and looked at the images on the wall in despair. She realized that Xiao Chen had already returned to the front yard and was inspecting everywhere. She couldn't help but shout with all her might, "Xiao Chen! Xiao Chen! I'm here. Can you hear me? Come and save me." Unfortunately, Xiao Chen was still completely unaware. He frowned and looked around the yard. Meanwhile, Qing Menjing had already been brought out of the secret room by the young master. Her shouts also became softer and softer until they gradually disappeared into the distance. "This place, why is it so strange?" Xiao Chen stood in the middle of the house and muttered to himself. He didn't know why he felt an indescribable sense of irritation in his heart. Just now, he had already used his divine sense to search all the rooms in the house. He had also personally checked all the suspicious places, but he didn't find any clues. Apart from being a little puzzled, Xiao Chen also felt an indescribable sense of anxiety. It was as if a small claw was constantly scratching his heart, but he didn't know where this feeling came from. Xiao Chen could sense that there should have been a stranger's aura in this house a few minutes ago. But why was there no one after he entered? Suddenly, they all disappeared. Could it be that someone had informed him in advance? But ever since he entered the city, he had been staring closely at Elder Nangong. He didn't see him make any movements to send out any messages. Isn't this too strange? Could it be that the other party's spies have already spread all over the town? Elder Nangong stood behind Xiao Chen in confusion. He originally thought that when he brought Xiao Chen to visit suddenly, the young master would definitely be caught red-handed in the room. He didn't expect to find nothing. So now, Elder Nangong felt a little guilty. He silently stood on the spot and didn't dare to make a sound. He was afraid that if Xiao Chen couldn't find him, he would take revenge on him. Now that he was powerless, he didn't even have a chance to resist. "Why have you been standing here like a fool?" Sure enough, as Elder Nangong expected, after looking around, Xiao Chen couldn't help but sink his face. He stretched out his leg and kicked Elder Nangong's leg. He said angrily, "Is there any secret passage here? Or does that guy have other hiding places? Hurry up and bring me there, don't waste time here." Chapter 1464. This. "I'm not sure about this either." Elder Nangong's face was bitter as he explained helplessly, "This is only the second time I've come here. In all fairness, even if it was you, you wouldn't casually tell your family's secret passage to an outsider, right? After all, I'm just here to help. They don't have to show me their family's wealth." Elder Nangong didn't lie about this. In his opinion, the immortal cultivation world was a place where strength was important. Only strength was the standard to measure a person's value. Therefore, Elder Nangong was usually busy with cultivation or in seclusion in the sect. He had no time to care about other things. This time, if it wasn't because the great leader had found him and asked him to help with this matter, and he owed him a big favor, Elder Nangong wouldn't have specially come out of the sect. He didn't expect that he would suffer such a big setback because of Xiao Chen. After leaving the sect with the disciples, Elder Nangong followed the great leader's order and came here once. Therefore, he only knew that this place was the young leader's headquarters. After accepting the task here, he went straight to the Burning Sky faction. As for the other situation in this place, he was really ignorant and didn't know anything. Seeing that he couldn't squeeze any information out of Elder Nangong, Xiao Chen's anxiety didn't decrease. Instead, it became more intense. However, there was nothing he could do. The anxious Xiao Chen simply carried Elder Nangong and walked to the gate of the house. Then, he stared at the empty sign and ordered in his sea of consciousness, "Little Nethery, burn this house for me. Don't let it affect other places." Yes. The flame of the underworld appeared in Xiao Chen's palm with a "hoo" sound. Then, it leaped into the air and instantly split into a dozen bluish-purple flames. They circled above the house for a while and then fell down like rain. In an instant, all the houses and buildings in this house were ignited. Although Xiao Chen had purposely instructed the fire of the underworld not to burn other buildings, there were still quite a few houses near this house. Moreover, most of them seemed to be empty, because even until the entire house was burnt to ashes, no one came out to take a look, or ran over to extinguish the fire. After the fire of the underworld completed its task and returned to Xiao Chen's body, Xiao Chen stared at Elder Nangong and pondered for a while. He raised his hands slightly and used his divine sense to quietly place a divine sense imprint on him. In just a breath's time, Xiao Chen was done. He looked at the Nangong elder, who did not notice anything, and instructed indifferently, "Forget it. Just by looking at you, I can tell that you are a simple-minded fool. There is no point in keeping you around. Before I change my mind, quickly scram." "What did you say?" I can really go now?" "You're not kidding, are you?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Elder Nangong suddenly froze and asked stutteringly. Elder Nangong had always thought that Xiao Chen would vent his anger on him for not being able to find the person. He did not expect that Xiao Chen would let him go so easily. For a moment, he was at a loss. "Nonsense, you still don't want to go, right? Why, do you want this immortal to send you off with my flying sword?" Xiao Chen directly took out his flying sword and looked at Elder Nangong coldly. He said impatiently, No need. I can go by myself, I appreciate the immortal's kindness. I'll take my leave now, take my leave." Elder Nangong trembled in fear and did not dare to ask anything more. He immediately turned around and fled for his life. In the process of fleeing, Elder Nangong would occasionally glance behind him from the corner of his eyes, afraid that Xiao Chen would suddenly change his mind and give him another slap. Only after he had fled for a long distance and saw that Xiao Chen still did not make any move, Elder Nangong finally relaxed and hurriedly ran in the direction of his own sect. Xiao Chen stared at Elder Nangong's back without moving. His expression was calm and he did not seem to have any strange thoughts. He had already thought about it. Although this old man did not know anything, he could still be considered as a bait. If that so-called young master knew that Elder Nangong was still alive, it was very likely that he would take the initiative to find Elder Nangong to understand the situation. If he could use Elder Nangong to catch this big fish, it would be much more convenient than blindly searching for the other party. Therefore, Xiao Chen naturally would not choose to kill Elder Nangong. Instead, he placed a spiritual sense imprint on his body and allowed him to leave on his own. After Elder Nangong had completely disappeared, Xiao Chen turned around and left the ruined residence, returning to the inn where Hong Zhu was staying. After entering the inn, Xiao Chen did not immediately go to his room to meet up with Hong Zhu. Instead, he stood at the counter and called for a waiter. "Good day, sir. What can I do for you?" The waiter immediately ran over and asked with a face full of smiles. Xiao Chen casually took out a few spirit crystals that he had brought from Burning Heaven faction and stuffed them into the waiter's hands. He then casually said in a seemingly unintentional manner, "It's nothing big, I just have a few questions that I would like to ask you." "Oh, sir, you are too polite." The waiter's eyes immediately lit up when he saw the spirit crystals. He hastily received them and stuffed them into his bosom. The smile on his face became even more sincere as he said, "Please do not hesitate to ask. As long as this waiter knows, I will definitely tell you everything I know." Xiao Chen nodded slightly and asked, "I would like to ask, have any strangers appeared in your town recently?" Strangers. The waiter carefully recalled for a moment before he slapped his thigh and said, yes. "A few hours ago, an unfamiliar beauty just happened to stay in our inn. That girl was very beautiful, and she looked unfamiliar. I don't think she has been here before." "A few hours ago?" Xiao Chen was stunned. Wasn't that Hong Zhu? He could only wave his hand, not knowing whether to laugh or cry as he said, "That girl was with me. What I am asking is, have there been any strangers who have been here in the past 1 or 2 months? In the past 1 or 2 months? The waiter blinked his eyes and frowned in deep thought for a while. Finally, he shook his head and said, "There don't seem to be any strangers who have appeared in our town during that period of time." The one who looked the most unfamiliar should be you, is that so? Xiaochen fell into a somewhat regretful silence for a while before he continued to ask, then do you know if there are any relatively powerful forces or clans in your vicinity? Oh, there are. Sir, are you looking for information or are you looking for someone? The waiter's spirit was roused. He immediately nodded his head heavily and said, the most famous place in our town is the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce's headquarters in Fallen Leaf Town in the east. I was fortunate enough to go there once before. The place is huge, and it's really imposing. There is. Chapter 1465. Xiaochen saw that the waiter wanted to say a few more words, so he quickly interrupted him and said in a bad mood, Stop, stop, stop. I'm not talking about the surrounding towns. I just want to ask if there are any big powers in your county. Why are you talking about such nonsense? You're talking about our Yaoxian county? The waiter scratched his head and thought for a while before replying, I really don't know what big powers there are in our county. However, there is a town called Floating Spirit Town not far from Yaoxian County. There is a sect called the Profound Cloud sect in that town. It is known as the second largest sect in the cultivation world and is also one of the best. Other than that, there really isn't anything else. After listening to the waiter's introduction, Xiaochen slowly knocked on the counter. He felt very strange. The headquarters of the young master seemed to be quite big, and with that kind of scale, he reckoned that there were a lot of people inside. How could the people here not know about it? Sir, do you have any other questions? If not, I'll go back to work. The waiter saw that Xiaochen didn't speak for a long time, so he asked tentatively. Xiaochen thought again and asked, then, in your county, or in the surrounding towns, are there robbers or bandits? For example, when a wealthy businessman was about to go out to do business, did he get kidnapped on the way? Sir, are you joking? When the waiter heard this question, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He stared at Xiaochen as if he was looking at an idiot. What's wrong? Xiaochen saw the waiter's expression and was a bit confused. Did he ask something wrong? The waiter sighed helplessly and explained, the headquarters of the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce is in the east of Yaoxian County, Falling Leaves Town. On the other side is the Floating Spirit Town where the Profound Cloud sect is located. With two big powers in charge, who would dare to openly cause trouble here? Unless they're really tired of living. Strange, this is really strange. Xiaochen muttered to himself in confusion. The headquarters of these bandits is located next to the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce. This is equivalent to guarding a big treasure. For them to be able to refrain from causing trouble and instead run to a place hundreds of miles away to rob, this doesn't seem to make sense. Sir, what did you say? What headquarters? The waiter looked at Xiaochen in confusion. Xiaochen waved his hand at him, then turned around and walked towards Hongzhu's room while muttering in a low voice. According to Elder Nangong, even if the bandit headquarters and the Profound Cloud sect don't have any friendly relations, they shouldn't be enemies. Since they aren't being threatened by enemies from both sides, and the size of their headquarters seems to be quite large, they shouldn't be afraid of that Chamber of Commerce. Is there any other reason? The waiter shook his head as he watched Xiaochen walk away, muttering to himself. He thought that this person was probably an idiot. He took out the spirit crystal and checked it again. When he found that it had not been swapped, he did not pursue the matter further. He turned around and went back to his own business. After Xiaochen entered the room, he briefly chatted with Hongzhu and explained the situation to him. After that, he began to use his divine sense to observe Elder Nangong's movements. Sure enough, that guy was doing something different. It turned out that Elder Nangong was not on his way to the Profound Cloud sect. Instead, he had returned to the burnt bandit headquarters and was standing near the original main entrance. Elder Nangong felt somewhat baffled when he saw the ashes and charcoal strewn all over the ground. The last time he was here, there were many people going in and out of this place and it had seemed very lively. But in the blink of an eye, it had become a pile of rubble. He had no idea where the young master and the others had hidden themselves. After wandering around the ruins of the residence, Elder Nangong did not discover anything and could only dejectedly turn around and leave, once again walking in the direction of Floating Spirit Town. What the hell, you're messing with me. Xiao Chen had observed Elder Nangong's movements from the formation just now. He thought that the elder had come back to deliver a message, so he was about to summon his flying sword and rush over. The moment he stepped onto the flying sword, he realized that the old man had left angrily again. He could not help but curse. After waiting for a while, Xiao Chen saw that Elder Nangong was really heading towards Floating Spirit Town and did not cause any more trouble. Feeling somewhat depressed, he could only helplessly withdraw his flying sword and stay in the room to chat with Hongzhu, intending to wait for the bandits to take the initiative to contact Elder Nangong. In a town not far from the north of Yaoxian County, two young girls with outstanding looks were strolling side by side on the street aimlessly. One of the girls had handsome facial features and exuded a spiritual aura. Although she was wearing the clothes of a Taoist nun, she did not appear old-fashioned. Instead, she had a valiant and heroic air about her, looking like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. As for the other girl, although she was also quite beautiful, her face was extremely pale, without the slightest trace of blood. Her eyes also appeared somewhat hollow, and the weather was clearly clear, but she was holding a strangely shaped umbrella. If someone were to pay attention, they would discover that her walking posture was also quite awkward and stiff. Fortunately, her long white dress concealed her strange posture, so it was not obvious. Gugugu, as the two were strolling, a strange sound suddenly came from the stomach of the fairy-like girl. Immediately after, her pretty face blushed and she pretended to look around as if nothing had happened. Only when she discovered that no one seemed to be looking in their direction did she relax. The umbrella-holding girl was slightly taken aback when she heard this sound. She took out a few apples and pears from her bosom and softly said in a cold but pleasant voice, "Big Sister Xian, are you hungry? I still have some fruits that I gathered from the mountains, why don't you eat them first? I'm afraid that we won't be able to find a place to work and earn money so quickly. Don't worry, I'll just eat an apple. You can keep the rest for yourself." Xian embarrassedly smiled and reached out for an apple. She casually wiped it on her Taoist robe and impatiently took a bite, chewing a few times with force. The umbrella-holding girl did not insist. Seeing that Xian only took an apple, she took the other fruits back. Seeing this scene, Xian turned her head in surprise and asked, "Xiao Yu, why aren't you eating? There's nothing else on that mountain, but there's a lot of fruits. It's probably enough for us to eat for a few years. You don't have to be so frugal, there's no need for that." That. Big Sister Xian, I'm a yin cultivator. To put it bluntly, I'm a living dead, so I don't need to eat to maintain my life. The umbrella-holding girl called Xiao Yu smiled helplessly and slowly walked forward with her head down. With a slightly bitter tone, she said, "Also, I've tried eating before, but no matter what I eat, I can't taste anything. I don't usually feel hungry either, so I'll leave the fruits for you." Chapter 1466. I'm sorry, I forgot about it. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it. Xian rubbed her nose awkwardly and scolded herself for touching a sore spot. He was already upset that he had been turned into a yin cultivator for no reason. Why did she have to expose his shortcomings? Why was her brain so bad? It's okay. Sister Xian, don't take it to heart. Xiao Yu didn't mind too much. She smiled and waved at Xian. Her gaze accidentally landed on a signboard on the side of the street. She immediately became spirited. She pulled Xian over and pointed at the signboard. "Sister Xian, look. What's that?" Xian was eating an apple. When she heard that, she turned around. Her mouth was still stuffed with apple meat. She asked in a muffled voice. "It looks like a cultivator's chamber of commerce." Xiao Yu looked at it carefully and said excitedly, "It looks new. Let's go in and try our luck. Maybe we can find a suitable job." Dada Cultivator's Chamber of Commerce? What kind of stupid name is that? Xian took a few more bites of the apple and threw away the core. She walked to the door of the Chamber of Commerce and looked inside for a while. After a round of observation, Xian found that there were quite a lot of people in the Chamber of Commerce. The decoration looked quite luxurious, unlike those fake companies in the secular world. After thinking for a while, she nodded and said, "Okay. Since there's nothing else to do now, let's go and take a look." After making the decision, the two women quickly walked into the Chamber of Commerce. Xiao Yu was still holding an umbrella, which was particularly eye-catching in the room. In fact, these two girls were Li Xian and Nia Xiao Yu, who were teleported from the inner martial arts world. For some reason, they were teleported to a barren mountain and quickly gathered together. At first, the two women were a little puzzled. They didn't know what was going on. They tried to find the whereabouts of Xiao Chen and the others. After looking around, they found that there were only the two of them on the barren mountain. They had no choice but to go down the mountain and go straight to the nearest town. However, when they arrived at the town, the two women were even more dumbfounded. They found that not only could they not find out anything, but even basic survival had become a problem. The common currency used in the immortal cultivation world was spirit crystals, but Li Xianer only brought money from the secular world, so she couldn't use it to buy things. Li Xianer once wanted to take the money to find a place to eat, but she was scolded by the owner of a restaurant, who threw her out along with the money. As a zombie, Nia Xiaoyu didn't need to eat or drink, nor did she need to sleep. She didn't have any material needs, so she was even worse off than Li Xianer. She didn't have anything valuable on her except a weird umbrella. This umbrella could protect Yin cultivators from being affected by the sunlight when they went out during the day. It was also the only thing Nia Xiaoyu had brought from the inner martial arts world to the cultivation world. Fortunately, there were many wild fruit trees on the barren mountain where they came from. During the first few days in the immortal cultivation world, Li Xianer basically relied on fruits to fill her stomach. Occasionally, she would get some game to improve her diet. Nia Xiaoyu didn't need to eat or drink to replenish her energy, so she just accompanied Li Xianer silently and put some fruits on her body. As for the place to live, after the first night on the barren mountain, they finally found an abandoned warehouse. After observing for a while, they found that no one came, so they simply lived in it. They didn't expect to live in it for more than a month. During this period, they also wanted to find some suitable jobs, at least in exchange for some spirit crystals to buy food. Li Xianer ate fruits every day for a month, so her face became thinner. Nia Xiaoyu's white dress had become gray, but she had no money to buy new clothes. She could only wash and dry the clothes every night and put them on the next day. Unfortunately, their strength was limited, and they looked like two delicate women. They couldn't find a suitable job in such a short time. There were some rich merchants or young masters who took a fancy to their beauty and wanted to marry them as concubines, but they were all rejected by the two of them. At this time, seeing the newly built De Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce, Li Xianer and Nia Xiaoyu walked into the Chamber of Commerce with the mentality of giving it a try. Anyway, even if they didn't succeed, there was nothing to lose. Seeing the two beautiful women walk into the shop, a young man in the Chamber of Commerce's uniform immediately greeted them. As soon as he walked in front of the two women, the man felt that one of the girls looked gloomy and inexplicably held an umbrella. However, he still plucked up his courage, put on a smile, and asked, "Hello, ladies. May I ask what business you need?" "Business? You can speak English? You're quite up to date." "That. Can you give a brief introduction first?" Li Xianer felt surprised and amused. In the originally quaint town, suddenly meeting such a strange staff member of the Chamber of Commerce made her feel like she was in the secular world. "Oh, of course, no problem. But what's English?" The young man nodded with a smile and said, "Our De Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce is almost omnipotent. There are only things that you can't think of, and there is no business that we can't do." "Isn't that a little too much?" Li Xianer curled her lips and said with a little disbelief. "Don't worry, as long as you can pay enough spiritual crystals, you can rest assured that no matter what kind of business it is, you can rest assured that our Chamber of Commerce will handle it. The young man patted his chest and said, for example, our Chamber of Commerce can help to find people, find a spouse, set up banquets, protect people, settle disputes, and so on. We can even provide a variety of jobs for people who come to seek employment. It can be said that we have all kinds of relevant business. I see. Then can we see what kind of jobs we can do first? Lysianer frowned slightly and asked helplessly. Originally, when Lysianer heard that the Chamber of Commerce would accept any kind of task, she wanted to entrust them to help to inquire about Xiao Chen and the others. However, when she heard that they had to pay, she immediately backed out and decided to ask about the job first. Of course, no problem. Ladies, please follow me. The young man smiled and nodded. Then, he made a gesture of invitation and led the way to the counter inside. Lysianer and Nie Xiaoyu looked at each other. Although they were still a little uneasy, they obediently followed behind the young man. After walking to the side of the counter, Lysianer and Nie Xiaoyu saw that the man greeted another middle-aged man behind the counter. Then, he pointed at them and whispered a few words to them. Chapter 1467. Lysianer was just about to walk closer to listen to what they were talking about when she saw the young man walking back with two forms with a smile. After handing the forms to Lysianer and Nie Xiaoyu respectively, the young man said with a smile, "Take it. Fill in this registration form first. It's best to write as detailed as possible so that we can contact you at any time." Nie Xiaoyu held the umbrella in one hand and the form in the other. She lowered her head and looked at the contents of the form silently. "That's it? That's it?" Lysianer pinched the corner of the form and looked at the young man suspiciously. "What do you mean? What else do you want to do?" the young man asked with a strange expression. Lysianer asked warily, "You're not going to charge us a fee, are you? After we fill in the form, you're going to ask us to pay a middleman's fee, or give us a set of inferior clothes to pay a uniform deposit? How is that possible? Miss, don't joke around." The young man looked at Lysianer speechlessly, shook his head, and said, "Our de Cultivation Chamber of Commerce's reputation is well known in the cultivation world. We never charge any fees from workers. We're an official direct store, not a deceptive company. If you don't believe me, you can ask around." "You're so full of yourself," Lysianer muttered to herself. She waved her hand and said, "Well, that's all. You can go." The young man quietly rolled his eyes and turned to leave. Suddenly, he heard another cold voice, "Wait, you can't go yet." "What now?" The young man turned around angrily, thinking that these two girls weren't here to make trouble, were they? After turning around, the man discovered that it was another girl with a deathly pale complexion who was speaking this time. She was also staring at him with her empty eyes, appearing to be extremely cautious and flustered. Nie Xiaoyu waved the form in her hand and said coldly, "You haven't given us a pen to fill in the form." The young man couldn't help but shiver. Only then did he remember that he was talking to Lysianer just now. As a result, he forgot about this matter. The pen was still in his hand. Taking out two pens and handing them to Lysianer and Nie Xiaoyu, the young man quickly instructed, "After you're done filling out the form, just hand it to the uncle at the counter. He'll help you with the other procedures. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first." After saying that, the young man did not wait for the two to answer. He turned around and walked quickly to the door to receive other guests. In his opinion, although these two girls were quite beautiful, they looked strange. It was better for him to stay away from them. Lysianer and Nie Xiaoyu naturally didn't know what the young man was complaining about. They carefully read the registration form and then found a few strangers who didn't look like staff members to ask about the situation of the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce. After a round of asking, the two women actually received one-sided praise. Only then did they believe that this place was really not a scam. They registered their identity information, cultivation level, residential address, and so on the form one by one. Then, they returned the form to the middle-aged man at the counter. A chi refinement stage cultivator and a devil cultivator cultivator. This level is too low. The middle-aged man took the form and shook his head with a frown. Although he didn't know what cultivator was, he knew that devil cultivators weren't strong. Uncle, we really need a job. Can you help us find a suitable job? Li Xianer leaned on the counter, put her palms together, and begged sincerely. The middle-aged man thought for a while and waved his hand helplessly. There really isn't a suitable job for you at the moment. Leave this information form. If there's a suitable job for you, our people will go to your door and contact you. How about it? Then. All right then. If there's a job, please choose us first. Although Li Xianer was a little unwilling, she could only nod gloomily. She left the Chamber of Commerce with Nie Xiaoyu and walked to the abandoned warehouse where she lived. After walking for a long time, Li Xianer couldn't see the door of the Chamber of Commerce anymore. Seeing that no one came out to ask them to pay any fees, Li Xianer secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this Chamber of Commerce wasn't a scam. Although the name sounded a little strange, as long as it was legal, it didn't matter. She only hoped that this strange Chamber of Commerce could really help them find a job. When the two women returned to the abandoned warehouse, it was already very late. Thinking of the words of the middle-aged man, Li Xianer felt a little annoyed. She simply sat on the ground and closed her eyes to cultivate. Li Xianer felt that if she could successfully break through to the foundation establishment stage, it might be easier for her to find a job. Now that she was stuck in the chi refinement stage, it was really too depressing. Sister Xianer, actually you're already very powerful. It's all because my strength is too low that I'm a burden to you. Now I can't even find a job. Sigh. Nie Xiaoyu sighed softly and said with a lonely face. In her opinion, the people of the Chamber of Commerce must have looked down on cultivators, so they deliberately didn't give them a job. If only Li Xianer was here, they might be able to find a suitable job. Xiaoyu, don't say silly things. How can you be blamed for this? Li Xianer opened her eyes and gently patted Nie Xiaoyu's hand. She said softly, actually, I thought that the chi refinement stage was very powerful, but after entering the world of cultivation, I found that there are high-level cultivators everywhere. Since the two of us are together, there's no need to differentiate between you and me. Sister Xianer, Nie Xiaoyu was very touched by Li Xianer's words. Just when she was about to say something, she suddenly heard a rumbling sound from Li Xianer's stomach. Li Xianer's pretty face blushed. Only then did she remember that she had only eaten an apple today, so now her stomach was disappointingly protesting. Are you hungry? I still have some fruits here. Nie Xiaoyu took out the fruits from her arms and placed them in front of Li Xianer. After thinking for a while, she said, Sister Xianer, I'd better go to the mountain again and get you some delicious game. You can't eat fruits every day. You have to ensure that you have a balanced nutrition. Although Nie Xiaoyu had the protection of the umbrella during the day, she still liked to move around at night. Now that it was already night, she gradually became more energetic. Chapter 1468. There's no need. I'll just make do with some fruits. Before Li Xianer could finish her sentence, Nie Xiaoyu had already flown out of the window with her movement technique. Seeing this, Li Xianer had no choice but to give up. She smiled helplessly, closed her eyes, and continued to cultivate, waiting for Nie Xiaoyu to bring back some game. After cultivating for a short while, Li Xianer vaguely heard a noise coming from outside. She frowned slightly, opened her eyes, and listened carefully. It seemed that someone was fighting not far away. There were whistling sounds of fists and kicks, and there were also women's shouts. The woman's voice sounded a little familiar. Why did it sound like Nie Xiaoyu's? Li Xianer was shocked. She immediately stood up and released her divine sense toward the source of the sound, preparing to investigate the situation. After a search, Li Xianer found that Nie Xiaoyu had been surrounded by several men in black in the forest not far from the abandoned warehouse. Nie Xiaoyu tried her best to break out of the encirclement, but the men in black did not let her break out of the encirclement. They did not attack her either. It seemed that they were just constantly exhausting her chi, and had no intention of hurting her. At this time, Nia Xiaoyu looked a little panicked. Her pale face now looked even more terrifying, and her movements became a little slow. It seemed that she could not hold on any longer. Seeing this, Li Xianer could not be bothered to cultivate anymore. She immediately rushed out of the warehouse and rushed in that direction. After running a few steps, before she reached the scene, Li Xianer saw from afar that Nia Xiaoyu had been subdued by one of the men in black. She saw that the man in black grabbed Nia Xiaoyu, then made a gesture to the others, and directly fled to the west. The rest of the men in black also quickly followed. The group of people shuttled through the forest very skillfully, and soon lost track of them. Li Xianer was very anxious. She tried her best to chase in the direction they left. After chasing for several kilometers, she still could not catch up with them. She could not even see their shadows. Slowly stopping, Li Xianer stomped her feet in annoyance. She was depressed and confused. Where did this group of people come from? Why did they want to capture Nia Xiaoyu? They did not have any feuds with others recently, right? Logically speaking, according to the level of the men in black, it would be a piece of cake for them to capture another person. However, they did not have any intention of turning back to capture her. What was going on? Li Xianer returned to the abandoned warehouse in puzzlement. She couldn't figure out the reason behind it no matter how hard she tried. She didn't dare to practice on her own anymore. She first blocked the broken warehouse door with something and sat in the corner. She spent the whole night vigilantly observing her surroundings, afraid that the men in black would return and take her away. Li Xianer spent the night in fear, but nothing happened. Early the next morning, she ran to the small town with two swollen panda eyes. She wanted to see if there was a police station in the secular world or a government office where she could find people. Li Xianer to find people several times in the town. She to with for her. She to with for with. She, and for. And, for with to, with, for. Li, for, she. She to, li, for with to, for. And. Yesterday, Li Xianer learned from the staff of the Chamber of Commerce that she could spend money to find people. She did not expect that in just one day, there would be one more person she needed to find. Li Xianer, who was penniless, stood on the street and looked around helplessly. She sighed heavily and went back to her residence unhappily. She ate some of the fruits she had left last night to fill her stomach. Then, she sat on the ground in a daze, thinking about what to do next. Knock, knock, knock. While Li Xianer was frowning and worrying, a knocking sound came from outside the door. Before Li Xianer could respond, the sound came again. Excuse me, Li Xianer, are you there? I am an employee of the Immortal Cultivation Chamber of Commerce. We have a suitable job recently, and I want to ask if you want to take it. Hearing that it was an employee of the Chamber of Commerce, Li Xianer, who was nervous, was relieved. Just now, she thought it was those men in black who had come back to catch her. Opening the door, Li Xianer saw a man in the uniform of the Chamber of Commerce standing in front of the abandoned warehouse. He was looking around in surprise, as if he thought he was in the wrong place. Huh? Why are you here? Li Xianer took a closer look and found that the person was the young man who received her at the entrance of the Chamber of Commerce yesterday. I am responsible for running errands and entertaining people in the Chamber of Commerce, so contacting the employees is also my job. Seeing that Li Xianer really walked out of the dilapidated warehouse, the young man's spirit was lifted. He immediately took out the contract, handed it to her, and said with a smile, "Look at the contents of the contract. If there is no problem, sign now, and you can start working immediately." Li Xianer took the contract and read it carefully. She felt that it was reasonable. Just as she was about to agree, she hesitated and asked, "There is no problem with the contract, but my companion who was with me yesterday was taken away at night, so now I am the only one who can go to work. I want to ask, can you help me find her?" No problem, finding people is also one of the businesses of our Chamber of Commerce. The young man nodded and answered fluently, there are several levels of searching for people. If you send ordinary experts to search, each person needs to pay 10 spirit crystals a day. If you ask for more powerful experts, then the search speed and range will be expanded, and the cost of spirit crystals will increase exponentially. An employee is missing, and it also needs money to find her? Li Xianer muttered to herself. After thinking for a while, she waved her hand and sighed softly, forget it. If I had so many spirit crystals, would I have to go to work for your Chamber of Commerce? Let's talk about finding people later, I'd better go to work first. When Li Xianer asked this question, she actually still had a glimmer of hope that Nie Xiaoyu had registered with the Chamber of Commerce, so the Chamber of Commerce could help find her whereabouts. She didn't expect that she would still need to pay spirit crystals like usual to find people, so she had no choice but to give up the idea. Then come with me to the Chamber of Commerce now. You can go to work directly after completing the procedures. The young man didn't care about Li Xianer's previous mutterings. He shrugged and led her to the Chamber of Commerce. At the same time, I can also take her spirit down a notch, so that she can be more tactful in the future. Looking at Elder Shen's proud and elated expression after his evil scheme succeeded, the young master reckoned that he must have suffered quite a bit from that little girl, which was why he came up with such a wicked idea. It would be good if he could teach her a lesson. That's a good idea. Let's do that. Everyone has been busy moving for the past few days, so they must be a little tired. You should rest early too. The young master nodded and waved his hand casually, sending Elder Shen away. After Elder Shen left, the young master wanted to go back to his room to sleep. However, he remembered that he hadn't seen his father since he came back, so he could only sigh helplessly. He changed his clothes and went out again, heading towards the largest room in the courtyard. At the other end of the courtyard, Qing Menjing was being led forward by a rope by a guard unwillingly. They were led to a simple room. At this moment, Qing Menjing's heart was filled with anger. After a few days of tiring traveling, her clothes were almost completely covered in dust, and there were a few dead leaves stuck to her hair. Her entire body was soaked in sweat, feeling sticky and extremely uncomfortable. Right now, what Qing Menjing hoped for the most was a place where she could take a good bath. In the end, after arriving at this courtyard, she was brought here and there, with a few guards changing. She even walked to such a strange place, so she was in a terrible mood. Fortunately, although the guards were not very polite to her, they didn't do anything out of line, so Qing Menjing could still control herself. However, with her current dirty clothes and messy hair, no one would be interested in her. Go in, there's something good waiting for you inside. Outside the room, the guard opened the door and pushed Qing Menjing from the back to the front. After pushing her through the door, he slammed the door shut and called his other companions to take turns to guard her. Shameless thief, you're courting death. If you have the ability, untie the ropes on me. If I don't beat you to death, my surname isn't Cheng. Qing Menjing staggered from the push and almost fell. She turned her head and wanted to roll her eyes at the guard, but she found that the door had been closed. She angrily shouted at the door. Who's here? When Qing Menjing was throwing a tantrum at the door, a faint female voice suddenly came from the corner of the room. Qing Menjing was shocked. She didn't expect that there would be someone else in this room. She immediately turned her head back and felt that the entire room seemed to be filled with a cold air. It was as if there was a white ball hiding in the dark corner, and the voice came from there. She couldn't help but shiver. Qing Menjing gathered her courage and took a deep breath. She walked a few steps in that direction and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that the white ball seemed to be a woman. Moreover, it was a woman with disheveled hair. After a few more glances, Qing Menjing realized that the woman's face was completely covered by her hair. She couldn't see her face at all. After hesitating for a long time, she still gathered her courage and asked carefully, "Hey, you. Who are you? Are you a human or a ghost?" Why do you look so gloomy? This voice seems a little familiar. The woman in white suddenly muttered softly. She then slowly raised her head and stared at the young girl standing in front of her. After staring for a while, the woman in white realized that although the young girl's face was covered in dust, the outline of her facial features was very similar to someone she knew. She tentatively asked in a low voice, Are you Miss Cheng Menjing? Cheng Menjing was slightly startled and said with some confusion, I am. Who are you? How do you know me? I'm Nie Xiaoyu. Do you still remember me? The woman in white forced a smile and introduced herself softly. Chapter 1470. Nie Xiaoyu. Cheng Menjing frowned and thought for a moment. Then, she suddenly realized something and said, Oh, I remember. You're that Yin cultivator. Seeing Nie Xiaoyu nod, Cheng Menjing immediately became excited and said, That's great. You're the first person I've seen apart from Shishan Giant Bull since I came to the cultivation world. Are you alone? Have you seen anyone else? Do you know where Xiaochen is? Why are you here? Were you also caught by them? Cheng Menjing couldn't wait to ask a series of questions. However, before Nie Xiaoyu could answer the first question, she shook her head and said, Forget it. We'll talk about these questions later. Help me untie the rope first. I'm going to beat the guard at the door. That guy is so annoying. He pushed me just now and I almost fell. Nie Xiaoyu didn't get up to help Cheng Menjing untie the rope. Instead, she smiled helplessly and said, Well, Miss Cheng, it's not that I don't want to help you, but we're in the same boat now. What do you mean? Cheng Menjing was stunned and walked over subconsciously. When she walked up to Nie Xiaoyu and took a closer look, she found that Nie Xiaoyu had also been tied up by the rope with the same strange symbol. She was immediately dumbfounded. Nie Xiaoyu sighed bitterly and said faintly, And, even if our hands aren't tied up, there's no way to untie this kind of rope, because this rope is actually a kind of magic artifact. It can't be untied by brute force alone. Someone has tried to untie it for me before, but no one succeeded. What? Someone helped you untie it? Cheng Menjing was stunned when she heard this. She quickly asked, Was it someone else from the inner martial arts world? Were they also locked up? Who was there? Did you see Xiaochen? No, those people are the immortal cultivators who were locked here before. They are not from the inner martial arts world. Nie Xiaoyu shook her head and explained simply, They are all tied up by this kind of celestial device. After I came here, I tried with them for a long time and used all kinds of methods I could think of, but I couldn't untie the ropes. I see. Cheng Menjing looked a little disappointed. She then asked, What about these people you mentioned? I see that you're the only one in this room. Nie Xiaoyu's expression suddenly dimmed. She replied in a low voice, They were taken away by the bad guys outside yesterday and never came back. That. Nie Xiaoyu, I don't know if it's convenient to ask, how did you get caught? Cheng Menjing saw that Nie Xiaoyu was a little depressed, so she changed the topic and asked. Cheng Menjing's excitement from seeing her colleagues had long since disappeared. She also felt sad when she saw Nie Xiaoyu's miserable appearance. Helplessness and depression intertwined in her heart. Nie Xiaoyu's strength was not enough, and her vitality was restricted by the rope. It seemed that she could only hope that Xiaochen could find this place again so that he could escape with her and Nie Xiaoyu. He didn't know if that guy would be able to track him down in a short period of time and successfully rescue him from the place he had been searching for. I came in with Sister Li Siener and landed on a barren mountain. Originally, we wanted to find others, but Nie Xiaoyu didn't know the complicated emotions in Cheng Menjing's heart at this time. She briefly recounted her experience with Li Siener in the small town and how she was caught by the men in black. It seems a little strange. Cheng Menjing withdrew her thoughts. After listening to Nie Xiaoyu's narration, she frowned and stood up. She paced back and forth in the room and muttered to herself, Why did they only catch you but not Li Xianer? Even if they want to rely on us to threaten Xiao Chen, wouldn't they have one more bargaining chip if they could catch one more person? I'm not sure about this. Nie Xiaoyu blinked and tried to guess. Maybe it was because I was outside at that time, and they didn't see Sister Sienna in the warehouse, so they didn't catch her? That's unlikely. Didn't you say that Li Xianer chased after you later? It's just that you couldn't beat her, so you were caught before she arrived. Cheng Menjing shook her head and denied Nie Xiaoyu's guess. If they wanted to catch Li Xianer, they should have turned back and caught her. This. I don't know. Nie Xiaoyu was also confused. Ever since she was caught inexplicably and locked in this room, no one had come to find her. She asked those cultivators, but they didn't know what was going on. So, at this time, she couldn't figure out what those people saw in her. Strange. It's too strange. No matter how hard Cheng Menjing thought about it, she felt that something was not quite right, but she couldn't figure out the specific reason for a while. She only felt that the other party's actions didn't seem to be logical, but she couldn't find a direction to break through. Miss Cheng, then why are you here? Seeing that Cheng Menjing couldn't think of anything for a long time, Nie Xiaoyu changed the topic and asked, were you also caught by the men in black? Aya, don't call me young miss. It sounds weird. Just call me Menjing. Cheng Menjing was just about to say a few polite words when she suddenly heard the door being pushed open. 2 guards rushed in from the outside. Before the 2 women could react, the 2 guards quickly walked to Nie Xiaoyu's side, pulled the rope on her body, and dragged her away without saying a word. Nie Xiaoyu was completely scared. Her little face was as white as a snowflake. She couldn't help but follow the 2 guards and stumble out of the room. Cheng Menjing was also shocked. When she came back to her senses, the door had been closed, and Nie Xiaoyu's desperate eyes were isolated outside the room. Hey! You stinking bastards, why did you take her away? Hurry up and send her back to me. Cheng Menjing was so angry that she stomped her feet. She shouted at the door, we haven't finished talking yet. Why don't you know the rules at all? Don't you know that interrupting other people's conversation is a very rude behavior? However, no matter how Cheng Menjing scolded, the closed door never opened again. Moreover, the soundproofing of this room seemed to be quite good. She originally wanted to stick to the wall to listen to the movements outside, but she found that she couldn't hear anything at all. After trying several times, it didn't work. In the end, Cheng Menjing could only sit on the ground angrily and stare at the door with her bright eyes. She planned to interrogate the fierce guards the next time they came in. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.